everyone, it's CricketSong from Lunar Wisdom, and I have been asked numerous times about book recommendations. So I have a whole bunch of piles of books sitting in front of me, and I am going to see what I can do to get through some. And these are just some book recommendations, and so I guess I'll just start. So let me begin by saying I teach an online course or facilitate an online course, and I've recently been opening up to online classes and workshops. But the individuals who are enrolled in my Dedicant's online course, The Year and the Day, have 3 books that we work from. So obviously I'm going to recommend these 3 books. The first book, and these are basic information, basic Wicca books. Understand that just because I recommend a book does not mean I agree 100% with the author. Because if you are one of my students, you will know that I don't agree with everything in any book that I've read. I never take a book away and go, oh my God, this is me 100%. Well, maybe there's one book I might do that with. But generally, I don't. You know, I feel you read a book and you take what's right and true for you and you trash the rest because it's just someone's opinion. So having said that, the first book that I recommend for basic understanding of Wicca, but I feel it's more witchcraft, not Wicca, and I separate the definitions between Wicca and witchcraft. So this is more of a witchcraft book. Is The Craft, a Witch's Book of Shadows by Dorothy Morrison. Again, a basic understanding. There's some stuff I really like in here, and there's some stuff in here that I just don't like, but it's a great beginning place to begin. Is The Craft, a Witch's Book of Shadows by Dorothy Morrison. The next book I am going to recommend, which is another book that the Dedicants also read through, is, I'll go with this one, The Circle Within by Diane Sylvan, Creating a Wiccan Spiritual Tradition. And I've recommended this book in the past. My Dedicants read this book. I encourage everyone to read this book. It's a great book on crafting your own personal Wiccan tradition. And this is what my course is really based upon, creating your own Wiccan spiritual tradition. I like this book a lot. This is like the first book I tell people to read. So that's good. It's a little more in depth than The Craft, but I feel like you can be brand new and read that and get a great grasp of the foundation of Wicca. Then the next book that the Dedicants read is A Witch's 10 Commandments, Magical Guidelines for Everyday Life by Marion Singer. And this is basically a witch. Now, Marion Singer is a Wiccan, but this goes through the 10 tenets that witches should live by, and it sort of puts them in comparison to the 10 Commandments of Christianity. And it really gives you, again, there's stuff in here I do not agree with, but it has questions for you to answer at the end of each chapter, which is a tenet or a commandment. And I like this a lot, which is why the Dedicants read that. So those are the first 3 that I feel are good. In that sort of venue, like the beginning, Wicca, witchcraft, there are 2 other books I highly recommend. Now for a more basic, I don't know anything about Wicca and witchcraft. This is an older edition. This is the 2nd edition, but The Idiot's Guide to Wicca and Witchcraft. I used to teach out of this book to my children and my nephew. It's a really great basic information. Although some of the stuff I just don't resonate with. but it gives you a pretty good, like, not magic. It has some spells. It has preparing for ritual. What does a witch mean? It gives you some gods and goddesses, practicing Wicca and witchcraft, the tenets. It's a good basic understanding. So if you were to read this with the craft, I feel like you'd get a pretty basic understanding of what Wicca and witchcraft is. A little more in depth on that, and I actually like the information in this book more than Dorothy Morrison's book. The only reason why I don't teach out of this book is because of the setup of how it is. This book is the Dedicant, a witch's circle of fire, a course of study in the old religion by Thuri Calafia. I don't know how to say her name. She just came out with the second book, The Initiate, which I haven't read yet, but I'm going to buy and read. I like this book. I like this book a lot. But as I was saying, the thing I don't like, and the only reason why I don't teach from this book, is because it follows the wheel of the year. And because when I start my courses, I try to do it for me so it's easier to teach people. And if I can't start it all on the same day and follow the wheel. So some people I may start teaching them at Imbolc, but others I start at Samhain. And for me to be consistent, just to be easier, it's easier to have an outline that doesn't have to go with the wheel. And that would mean jumping around in this book. And I like the flow of this book. And I like she has sort of homework and things to consider and exercises to do. I like her explanation better. I really like this book. So it's not a book I teach from, but I strongly urge people to read. I really like this book. I highly recommend this book. Okay, so say you've gone through, those are like the basics of Wicca and witchcraft. So then you've read through them, you have a basic understanding, you get it all. What's the next place I would suggest you go through? I guess Living Wicca. I like Scott Cunningham. I like his Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. I like that book. But I really like Living Wicca better. This is sort of the next step from basics. He has the Wiccan mysteries in here, talking about a little more like essays than step-by-step instructions and step-by-step information. It's a quick book to read, and I think I've heard that you could get the Solitary Practitioner and the Living Wicca book together as one book, and that would be great. So this is a good book. I recommend it. It's easy read. You'll zip right through it. Tools, altars, dress, and ritual jewelry, helping us design or a ritual. So I like Scott Cunningham. All right, so moving on. Okay, these books I truly, truly recommend. I'm going to start with these two books by Kaatryn MacMorgan-Douglas. Wicca 333, Advanced Topics in Wiccan Belief. And Wicca 334, Further Advanced Topics in Wiccan Belief. These books are great. These books are, I love these books. Love these books. Great topics, really makes you think. You have the basics, and now you need to, or you feel that you want to understand more. The real history of Wicca, she talks about all paths lead to the same place, and all gods are one God, right? Explains ideas behind that. The thing with her, and which I enjoy, is she's very logical and she's very intellectual, and she argues her points. Now again, just because I love these books does not mean I agree with everything she says, even though her arguments are logical and sound in sort of like a debate thought process. Because I feel that when you're talking about spirituality, everything isn't factual, because I believe there aren't all facts are facts, all truths are truths. She would argue this point, okay? So even though I don't agree with everything she says, I do find that the topics she brings up and the topics she discusses are great and are important for someone who considers themselves to be Wiccan, or even someone who thinks they might be Wiccan. She talks about propaganda, she actually gives further reading recommendations of reading for each of her topics. So you read about it and then you're like, I really want to learn more. She gives you links. She gives you questions in the back to answer. I really enjoy these books, and I will be teaching from these books. So these are two great books that you'll want to take a look at. Along with that, I have Advanced Witchcraft, Go Deeper, Search Further, Fly Higher with Edain McCoy. I like this book. It's not Wiccan, it's about witchcraft, and it again gives you more things to think about. It takes into consideration that you already know the basics. You already know about the sabbat. You already know about the tools. These books that I'm talking about now are books that you already understand the basics. You're probably practicing. You don't need to know spells. You already have books on spells. These are not those kind of books. These talk about topics like multiple realities, other worlds, the worlds of shamanism, what is a labyrinth, what is a maze, why would we utilize these, talks about animal totems, talks about spirits, talks about astrology, talks about spell writing, talks about all these kind of things, more advanced topics than just what is an athame and what is it used for. Okay, that's this book. Along that same thought, I have Wiccan Mysteries. I just recently finished this book a couple of months ago. Wiccan Mysteries, Ancient Origins and Teachings by Raven Grimassi. I know there's mixed feelings about Raven Grimassi, but I really like this book. This book, he takes, for example, the sacred texts, or the texts that we as Wiccans feel are important in our worship or practice. For example, the Charge of the Goddess. So he has it in here, and then he has a commentary on the Charge of the Goddess. Understand that these are his thoughts, his opinions, his research, and I'm not saying I agree. I'm going to keep throwing that out there with everything. The myth of the descent of the goddess, and then he has a commentary on that. He'll have the Witch's Creed and his commentary on the Witch's Creed. The Witch's Chant, the Great Rite Invocation, commentaries on those, drawing down the moon. Then he goes into deities, Wiccan deities, the God and the Goddess. The Watchers, I love that chapter. The Watchers, who are they? What do they represent? The cycle of rebirth and birth. He has women mysteries in here, men's mysteries. He has the fairy faith, the 3 mythical realms. I mean, this book, I really, really like this book. I really highly recommend this book. Okay. The Witch's Bible, The Complete Witch's Handbook by Janet and Stewart Farrar. I recommend this book. This book is 2 books put together. Now, I had a conversation with one of my students, and she said that this book was given to her when she first thought about studying Wicca, and witchcraft, and found it very intimidating, and it sort of, what did she say? It sort of made her a little nervous because of the things that are included in here. And I told her when I was looking through the book, she actually gave me this book and then found she had another copy of this book. But when I first flipped through it, I can see how this book, if this is the very first book you ever picked up about Wicca and witchcraft, flipped through it, read some of it, and went, oh my God, it might be intimidating. So personally, depending on where you're coming from and how deep your interest was with Wicca or witchcraft, I probably would not recommend this book being the first book you pick up. I would probably tell you to pick up even Living Wicca or The Circle Within, so you get a concept first of what it is. And this book is more about, about what it is, but it gives you a lot of practice, rituals, and then explains rituals to you. So I sort of see this or view this as a book. You're interested, you've read some of the first basic books, basic concepts, and now you want to know more, or you want to know how it's practically practiced. Then I would suggest this book, because it gives you the in-depth of everything. What is a coven? What is astral projection? What are spells? What are the tools? It's more of it's almost sort of like a textbook is how I sort of view this. I love it. My library isn't complete without it, but it's a little less fluffy, I guess, or less Wicca 101. All right, then where should I go from here? Okay, talking about a more in-depth and a textbook type of book, I'm going to talk about Mysteries of the Dark Moon. Now on my blog, on Blogspot, which you can find a link, I'll put a link in the information section. While I was reading this book, there are questions for you to consider. I actually read this and did all the exercises and recorded all my thoughts on these questions on my blog. So you can actually go to my blog, click on the tab at the top, my journey, my Dark Moon journey, and I worked through this book online so people could actually see my responses. I love this book. It takes into the consideration the idea of the dark moon, the goddesses of the dark moon, rites of rebirth, and this book was recommended to me by a friend of mine who was working at the same metaphysical shop that I was. She knew I was Wiccan, and she asked if I had ever read this book. I said I hadn't, and she suggested it. I read her copy, gave it back to her, and ordered my own, and through Amazon. The book is by Demetra George. I forgot to tell you that. I don't know exactly how to, or it's a moving story. Not a story, it's a moving experience. It's a moving read. And I feel like every witch should read through this. Again, I don't agree with everything, but it really helps you embrace the dark side of yourself, the dark side, the idea of death and rebirth, things that it really helps you work through shadows, your darkness within yourself, and sort of come face to face with some stuff. And some people may find that very daunting, and some people may be afraid, but I feel like if you are going to grow spiritually and as a witch or as a Wiccan, these are things that eventually you need to face and work through, or you will just remain stagnant where you are and you won't end up growing. So this book really changed my life, and I highly recommend it to anyone. Going hand in hand with that whole idea of dark, working through darks, working through shadows, I recommend this book, Shadow Magic Compendium by Raven Digitalis, exploring the darker aspects of magical spirituality, very much like Mysteries of the Dark Moon. I've talked about this before. There's exercises and things I've done while on fasting and worked through it. I know the Violet Cat also recommends this book. It is a wonderful book. It is an easy read. This book is much easier to read and get through than Mysteries of the Dark Moon. I will tell you that Mysteries of the Dark Moon can be difficult for some people. I've recommended it to a few people who've only gotten through one chapter. It is more of a textbook format. It does cover a lot of information. It really, I guess it's more intellectual and again, harder for some people to get into. This book is a lot easier to get into. Not saying that the information isn't as complete. If you are unsure of how you want to deal with your dark side, then I suggest working through this book first and then picking up the other book. Just a thought, just a suggestion. Talking about dealing with, on the whole idea of working through things, meditations and stuff, and that sort of stuff. I hate using the word stuff. Another book I suggest, which brings up a lot of things like that. I love Christopher Penczak, and while other people were working through, I guess it was the Inner Temple of Witchcraft or the Outer Temple of Witchcraft, Journey Through the Temple. There was a channel that was dedicated to working through that book. While they were doing that book, I actually picked up this book by Christopher Penczak. I just jumped in and went to a different book. The reason why I did that is because I didn't want to start at the beginning and work through the older books. I was looking for more meaty information. So I picked up the Living Temple of Witchcraft, Volume 1, The Descent of the Goddess, which made sense because at the time I was looking to work through shadows and things like that. I love Christopher Penczak. Can I tell you, if I ever have the opportunity to meet him, I want to meet him. This book is great, which actually has made me want to do volume 2, because there's a second volume to this, and then work through his whole temple series. I enjoy this book. I actually pull teachings from this book. There's meditations that I use. I believe this book actually came... No, there's a companion CD you can get for the meditations. Goes through spiritual laws, principles, power of teaching, which I feel for me was very important. I highly recommend Christopher Penczak's book. I have a couple of others of his that are great that I will go through at another time, I think, recommend. But Christopher Penczak is an author I really enjoy reading and I recommend to people. I haven't read a book yet of his that I did not like. It's not saying that there may be books out there that I may not like, and again, I don't agree with everything. I think I'm going to end this video right here because I will put up another video on books that don't necessarily deal with Wicca and witchcraft, but they do, but they are specific for specific topics that I'd like to recommend. So I am going to stop this video here, and these are recommendations for basic Wicca 101 and what I would consider Wicca 102 or 201 or whatever it is, the next level, which I have sort of compiled. Like I said, the basic books were those ones, I'll actually take a picture. The basic books will be the first picture. And the next books that are sort of more advanced, I will put in a picture with the titles here. Okay, I hope that has given you a whole bunch of books to read. And as always, guys, I love you. Mwah.